The person you quietly feel sorry for might actually be doing better than you. Not because they earn more, they don't, sometimes not even close, but because of one thing almost nobody thinks about until it's already too late to fix cheaply. Stay with me because this might sting a little. We've all done it, glanced at someone's paycheck, their job title, their neighborhood, and quietly ranked their life against ours. Higher income usually wins that comparison. But income was never actually the full scoreboard. There's a version of this story that plays out quietly in millions of households. Someone earning less ends up with more savings, more peace, sometimes more actual freedom, while someone earning significantly more ends up with less of all three. This isn't a rare exception. It's common enough to have a clear explanation. The key difference is the gap between what someone earns and what they actually keep, their savings rate, and that gap can move in completely opposite directions from income. Let's meet two versions of Derek. High earner Derek makes $120,000 a year. Modest Derek makes $55,000. On paper, it's not close. In real life, the story gets a lot more complicated. High earner Derek's income supports a bigger apartment, a newer car on a loan, and a lifestyle that quietly expanded to match every raise he's gotten. It looks successful from the outside. It mostly is on the outside. Modest Derek's income supports a smaller apartment, an older paid-off car, and a lifestyle that never really grew past what he actually needed. It looks unremarkable from the outside. It usually is, and that's exactly the point. Here's where it gets interesting. High earner Derek saves roughly 5% of his income after expenses, about $6,000 a year. Modest Derek saves about 20% of his around $11,000 a year. Let's run the math forward 20 years, assuming both invest what they save at an average 8% annual return. This is a hypothetical estimate based on historical averages. Actual results will vary, but the pattern is worth seeing clearly. High earner Derek's $6,000 a year grows to roughly $275,000. Modest Derek's $11,000 a year grows to roughly $504,000. Nearly double on less than half the income. Same 20 years, same market conditions. The person earning less than half as much ends up with almost double wealth. The difference came down to what happened to the money after it arrived, especially how much each person consistently kept and invested. This is the part that stings. It's not that high earner Derek is careless or foolish. He's just been playing a completely different game, one where the goalpost keeps moving every time his income does. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, the tendency for a new income level. A new purchase, a new upgrade to feel exciting for a while, and then quietly become the new normal, leaving the same restless feeling behind. Modest Derek isn't immune to this either. But because his income grew more slowly, his lifestyle never had the same opportunity to quietly race ahead of his actual needs. The gap between income and spending simply stayed wider. And that gap, not the income itself, is where wealth actually gets built. A large income with no gap builds nothing. A modest income with a wide, consistent gap can quietly build a great deal. There's also a fear-based reason this pattern happens. For some higher earners, rising income can also create pressure to visibly upgrade their lifestyle, nicer things. Better neighborhoods, proof to themselves and others that the money is working. When your lifestyle is already modest, there's often less room, and sometimes less temptation, to turn every raise into a visible upgrade, which paradoxically gives modest Derek more room to keep his lifestyle simple without feeling like he's falling behind. So the real question becomes uncomfortable. Is a bigger income actually making your life better? Or is it just raising the cost of appearing successful, without changing how secure you actually feel underneath it? This isn't an argument for staying poor or refusing to ever earn more. It's a challenge to a belief a lot of people never question, that more income automatically means more wealth, more security, more peace. Sometimes it does. Often, it only does if the gap between income and spending grows along with the income, and for a lot of people, that gap actually shrinks the more they earn, not grows. Let's look at what happens with an actual raise. High earner Derek gets a $10,000 raise and upgrades his car payment, his apartment, and his weekend spending to match. His savings rate stays roughly the same. If instead just half of that raise, $5,000 a year, had gone into savings and investing, at 8% average return, it could grow to roughly $229,000 over 20 years. That's the potential wealth that could have been created instead. This is the trap hiding inside every raise. It doesn't feel like a loss in the moment. It feels like an upgrade. The lost wealth is invisible because it was never spent. It just never got the chance to grow. Here's the desire-based angle worth being honest about. A lot of upgrades aren't really about need. They're about wanting to feel like the raise mattered visibly, immediately, to yourself and to everyone watching. There's nothing wrong with enjoying money. The problem is when every single increase gets fully absorbed this way, leaving their financial position far less improved than their higher income might suggest. Meanwhile, modest Derek's 20 years of consistent saving eventually reach a quiet turning point, the point where his investments begin, generating a meaningful amount of money on their own without requiring him to work another hour for it. That turning point doesn't happen with a dramatic announcement. It happens gradually after years of consistent saving and investing, often long before anyone looking from the outside realizes how much has actually accumulated. This is the part that should genuinely surprise you. Someone with a lower income can sometimes end up financially ahead of a higher earner, especially when they consistently keep and invest a larger share of what they earn. Living on a modest income can sometimes teach habits that become valuable later, spending carefully, avoiding unnecessary debt, and learning to live below your means. Those habits, kept even after income eventually rises, become a genuine advantage. Higher income, meanwhile, can sometimes make lifestyle upgrades easier to absorb, which means some people never develop the same level of spending discipline that a tighter budget tends to require. None of this means struggling financially is somehow good or that earning more is something to avoid. It means the habits built while managing less money can become incredibly valuable once more money eventually arrives. So here's the actual question worth asking, regardless of what your paycheck looks like right now. What's the gap between what you earn and what you actually keep? And has that gap been growing or quietly shrinking? If a raise is coming and your emergency fund and any high-interest debt are already under control, decide in advance what portion gets protected before the lifestyle upgrades even start. Even a modest percentage, protected consistently, adds up to a meaningful gap over the years. If your income is currently modest, the constraint you're working within right now might be quietly building habits that end up mattering more than the income gap ever did. That's genuinely worth recognizing, not resenting. And if you've been quietly measuring your life against someone else's paycheck, it might be worth asking a different question instead. What does their actual gap look like, not just their income? Because the person you've been quietly comparing yourself to might be earning more and keeping almost none of it. And the person you've been quietly overlooking might be earning less and keeping most of it. Quick recap. Income isn't the scoreboard. The gap is. Watch what happens to a raise before it disappears into lifestyle. And the habits built on less can become one of the biggest advantages once more eventually arrives. None of this requires earning less on purpose. It requires paying attention to one number most people never actually track, the real distance between what comes in and what actually stays. Pick one small step this week. Calculate your actual gap. Protect a portion of your next raise before it arrives. Or simply notice one upgrade you were about to make just to feel like the money mattered. Small, consistent attention to this one number rarely feels dramatic. But over years, it's often the exact thing separating people who quietly build wealth from people who quietly stay exactly where they started. 10 years from now, the size of someone's paycheck will matter far less than what happened to the gap underneath it, year after year, without anyone else ever noticing. So the next time you catch yourself quietly ranking your life against someone else's income, remember you're only seeing one number, and it was never the number that actually mattered most. This isn't about resenting what you earn or chasing less. It's about finally paying attention to the number that was quietly deciding your future the entire time, while everyone was busy watching the wrong one. If you want more honest breakdowns of the money psychology nobody teaches you, subscribe to Levels Nobody Sees, and this week, go find your actual gap. The person with less money might already understand something your paycheck has been quietly hiding from you. Now you know what to look for. What you do with it next is up to you.